This may seem like a ridiculous question at a time like this, but I wonder if you've ever been so overwhelmed, that all you were capable of doing was just sitting there in stunned silence. I wonder if you know what it's like when there's so much information swirling around, so many decisions to make, and so many items to process, that all you can manage is a blank expression and maybe an internal cry for help. I've seen some of this over the last several days and weeks as I have spoken to some of my clergy colleagues and church staff friends, both in Richmond and across the country. As you can imagine, the big topic is regathering and safety. We want to keep things going. Sunday school, social time, church services, programs, meetings, classes. But there's so much to consider as we go about making determinations about what happens in and around church. And the clergy and the congregations have many different approaches. There's no one consistent approach to any of this. Some have gone back to making reservations. Some have removed singing. Some are moving everything outdoors. Some are tiptoeing back indoors. There's nothing consistent about this time. And the Episcopal Church is doing all that we can right now in our own contexts to manage a careful and safe balance. We're all of us are trying to maintain balance. There's a great spiritual writer named Anne Lamott, and she's one of my favorites. She wrote an essay recently in which she says, "I'm having trouble keeping track of all of the things to be freaked out about right now." I hear you, Anne Lamott, loud and clear. And then she goes on with a very helpful image. She compares our current times to trying to put an octopus to bed. If you can imagine putting an octopus to bed, just when you have one leg tucked in, ready to go to sleep, 3 others pop out on the other side. Now, maybe I'm projecting here. But I imagine Jesus' disciples, they might have felt the same way in our reading this morning. After all, Jesus is throwing a lot at them in this most pivotal passage from the Gospel of Mark. There's like this quizzing, throwing of darts. Catch, catch, catch. The disciples might have felt. Who do people say that I am? Who do you say that I am? Don't tell anybody. And then Jesus gets to teaching. I got to undergo suffering by the hands of the scribes and be subjected to torture and crucifixion and die. Don't tell anybody. And then he goes into another intense teaching about losing yourself for the sake of the gospel, taking up your cross and following Jesus. And then poor Peter, he makes a go of it. He tries to get in there. He seems so overwhelmed that he rebukes Jesus. But then Jesus out-rebukes him and says, "Get behind me, Satan. You're setting your mind on earthly things, not on heavenly things." So if I had been in that crowd that day, in that moment, I would have just sat down with my mouth shut and tried to find a time to slink away. This is heavy stuff. It was then, and it is now. Who do we say that Jesus is? This is the question that is before us. What does it mean to carry the cross? This is the question that is before us. And what does it mean to set our eyes on heavenly things when we're trying to put an octopus to bed? Well, maybe James can help. James was writing to the Jewish community who had scattered themselves all around Palestine. He points us to our capacity to be a blessing. He also points us toward our capacity to curse. But let's focus on the blessings. How great a forest is set ablaze by a small fire, he says. But no one can tame the tongue. With it we bless the Lord and Father, and with it we curse. From the same mouth come blessing and cursing. My sisters and brothers, this ought not to be so, James says. I hear you, James. So what's a blessing? What is a blessing? Well, the word blessing began as the word benediction. And if you look at the word benediction, you'll see that it's made up of two words. Bene, benefit, and diction, as in to speak. So a benediction, a blessing, is to speak well of. To bless someone is to speak well of them, to wish them well, and want them to flourish. You might recall the first words of blessing that were ever uttered. We heard them in the book of Genesis when God was fashioning the earth and the skies and the creepy crawling things and probably octopi. God spoke well of them. God called them good, and even upon you and me, upon the entirety of humanity, God blessed us with her words, "You are good." You are good. So think about that. Blessing is a part of our DNA. Blessing is woven literally into our very existence. It's our nature to bless and be blessed. So as I think about Jesus' words today to his disciples, even to Peter, he's pointing them toward their true identity, the things of heaven. He's pointing them toward blessing. Who do you say that I am? Jesus asks. Well, there's one theologian that I really love who says that we cannot answer that question, who do you say that I am, without revealing who you are. The question is not a test, she says. It's not about getting the right answer. The question is about coming face to face with your own discipleship and your own identity. So to name who Jesus is to name who you are. So when I think about Jesus, and if somebody were to come up to me and say, "Who do you say that Jesus is?" This is what I would say. I would say that Jesus is the one who blesses. Jesus is a sower of blessing. I mean, think about all the things we've heard him do over even the last few weeks. We've heard him say, "Be open." We've heard him sit in a chair in a space of challenge with a woman with a sick daughter and be called out and then proclaim her healed. We've heard about him feeding thousands of people. We've heard about him reshaping the rules of society and getting us to pay attention to our heart. Jesus is a blessing giver, and he is dedicated to going to bat for those who don't have a bat. He points to mustard seeds and says, "Hey, that's enough." And he helps lost people find their way home. What a happy homecoming it would be for people to find their home in Jesus. So Jesus, through his blessing, reminds us of that original blessing and points us to the heavens from whence came those very first good words. But it's easy to forget that we are a blessing. And it's easy to forget that our job is to bless. And it's easy to forget because of all of those wriggling, slippery legs of the octopus that we just can't seem to get under control right now. I'm very certain that an octopus is very proud of those 8 legs. But when you're trying to squeeze them into one space, blessings are not the first words that might come from your lips. Set your sight on heavenly things, Jesus reminds us today. Look beyond the earthly, toward the heavenly, toward the blessing. St. Paul's. I am so happy that we are a church that blesses and does not curse. You may be new to this community, or you may have been coming here for decades. Maybe this is your first time at St. Paul's. Maybe this is your first time in church altogether. Maybe you're here because if one more octopus leg jumps out from underneath the covers, you're going to lose it. And if all you can do today is muster the energy to come and stare straight ahead, this is the place to do it. Because here you will hear a blessing. Every single Sunday you're going to hear one. But here I also pray that you feel God's blessing. You have come to a church where we have heeded the pastoral advice of James, and we believe in using our tongues to engage the power of blessing over cursing. Everything we do at St. Paul's, with our words, our liturgy, our hymns, our actions, our acts of service, our building, they're all intended to call us together as a people, holy and blessed. We do not condemn, rather we call people to love one another and to serve and include one another and to live in harmony and peace because we are God's beloved. Set your sight not on earthly things, but on heavenly things. Easy for you to say, right? Well, maybe that's why the disciples are sitting in a stunned, silent stupor this morning. But truth be told, we all have come here today to look toward heaven. And maybe the blessing, maybe the strange blessing for us today is to be reminded that all of this earthly stuff is temporary. This is not our final call. And maybe the blessing, the freeing words from God for each of us are the actual words of the blessing that we hear here and that you will hear today. Life is short. Life is short, and we do not have much time to gladden the hearts of those who travel the way with us. So we do not have much time, so we better get to blessing. True, we have octopi to manage. But on this homecoming Sunday, we gather as we have for 175 years to have words put to God's blessing for you and for me. So, my friends, do not get behind me. Do not get behind me. Instead, we are called to be side by side, hand in hand, arm in arm in the ways that we can be right now. We need as many people as we can to stand together and point toward heaven and embody Jesus, the risen one, the bestower of blessing upon blessing. So this day and forevermore, may you be blessed, and may you be a blessing to others. Amen.